Regardless, I just hope he's okay. Let's see, what did I miss? He's deflecting. Kiriakou told me that's typical Mossad behavior. Holy fucking, holy sheep of doom, you're a sheep. Beats pretending he doesn't know what we're talking about. Smart movies. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's just bullshit. It's motherfuckers are saying I'm a Mossad agent. That's stupid. Jim Carrey could be a model if bro wasn't a fucking goob, man. Just an idiot who uses his powers for bad, but I like his ways. You just called him an it. The previous, you can't call him an idiot and say you like his ways. An idiot who uses his power for bad, but you like his ways. You like him using his powers for bad, as you put it. Don't slur my bro Jim. This shit genuinely had the world thinking Jim Carrey got abducted and turned into a different person. What's going on, Seth? I'm cloning. Oh my gosh. Need an army of Seths. I need an army of Seths. All loyal, all only required tuna and Pepsi Max. What's going on, Onyx? W early stream. Yes, sir. Beast, did you save the link I shared? I did not. I'll go back. I can scroll up and get it though. You ain't fooling me, Dinwiddie. Shut up. Bald eagle, bald bees, connect the dots. We are cooked as a society. You a deepfake bees? Touch your ear so we can confirm or take off the hat. Look, let me touch my ear. This is my ear. Touching my ear. I'm not taking off my hat. You stink and you're not real. You're not even a real person. You're AI. You damn right. Nobody can clone that beautiful beard, the Moscow rules. Could at least take over Vatican City or Louisiana with an army of sets. No, did you hear Iran rejected a World Cup? I feel like it's hard to fight in a World Cup while your entire country is getting nuked by Israel and the USA. Yeah, that shit might make it a little hard. They did a good thing. Ain't like they was making it out the group stage either. Brazil, Argentina, and Spain should do it too, and Trump can suck dick. Like he does for Netanyahu. This is correct. What club you support? Technology is crazy nowadays, man. Deep fakes, bro. It's gonna get crazier. It's gonna get so the those comparisons of like Will Smith eating spaghetti over the past couple of years are terrifying. Didn't read Chad giving long enough for the stream producer to program these responses. Like, why are you even thinking that hard about it? W7 Stream Street, come on, man. He said a roar. Grown man. Roar. Roar.
Today, Jeffrey Epstein is famous all around the world for his horrible crimes against women and girls. But did you know there have been dozens
like that,
of suspicious deaths connected to Epstein?
22 people.
Today, Jeffrey Epstein is
The
famous
many
all around
murders
the world
of Jeffrey
for his horrible
Epstein.
crimes against women and girls. But did you know there have been dozens of suspicious deaths connected to Epstein, both while he was alive and since his death? Some of these seem like perfect accidents, people getting sudden illnesses and dropping dead, plunging from tall buildings, or often in prison, but others were so suspicious that it's impossible not to think these were straight-up murders carried out to protect Epstein and silence anyone who even thought about exposing him. In this video, I'm going to describe every single suspicious death connected to Jeffrey Epstein and what led up to it, and I'll leave it to you to decide if you think this is just a series of coincidental tragedies or a pattern of strategic hits engineered to stop the truth getting out.
Dramatization, not an actual event.
If you get hit by a truck, who you calling? If you get bit by a dog, who you calling? Only one law firm.
What is this? That's insane. It's never that serious, bro. Just do a weak little ad like everybody else. It just pissed me off. Oh, now I'm lagging. Bro, be
Coney
quiet.
Island. His father Seymour.
Hush.
Here's the video. Jeffrey Epstein liked to paint himself as the product of the gritty streets of South Brooklyn. However, the truth was far more uncomfortable. Born in 1953, he grew up in Seagate, a private, gated, predominantly Jewish community at the edge of Coney Island. His father Seymour worked as a city park's groundskeeper, and his mother Pauline was a school aide. Friends knew him as Epi, older brother to Mark, and a math and music prodigy who at least back then seemed perfectly normal, except for one childhood incident that stood out, a disturbing prank where Epstein allegedly dressed up as a Jewish rabbi to lure a girl close enough to touch. This is a dark and bizarre nugget of history related to Epstein that's painfully ironic in the light of recent theories that emerged years later that he was operating some kind of Mossad honeypot operation. But by early adulthood, it was clear that his ability to fail upward.
This is the facial structure and expression of somebody who is up to absolutely no fucking good at all. I just know he was doing. I'm glad we can't see his fucking hands in this picture.
would become his greatest asset. After dropping out of college in 1974 with no degree, the 21-year-old somehow secured a teaching job at the elite Dalton School. He was hired by headmaster Donald Barr, father of future Attorney General William Barr, who in another overdose of suspicious irony would later be in charge of Epstein's death investigation. At Dalton, the school became a hunting ground in Epstein's inappropriate pursuit of women. Officially, Epstein was fired in 1976 for poor performance, but some reports suggest that the real reason that he was fired was actually because he'd been aggressively flirting with students and even attending their parties as the only adult teacher amongst high school students consuming alcohol. While at Dalton, Epstein connected with Alan Greenberg, CEO of Bear Stearns, and just like that, Epstein traded in his chalkboard for Wall Street, seemingly with no qualifications or track record. By 1980, he had inexplicably risen to be a partner in the firm, advising wealthy clients on complex tax strategies, and even suspiciously landing himself an award, being named as Cosmopolitan's Bachelor of the Month. Now, I think it's pretty telling that as Epstein's career rose, he was publicly winning awards not for his teaching ability or financial management success, but for his supposed ability to get hold of girls. Funnily enough, the rise of his suspicious financial career would suddenly stall out in 1981 when an internal investigation at Bear Stearns forced his resignation. Apparently, he'd been investigated for giving a girlfriend access to inside information on new stock launches, which he was using to make extra money behind the scenes. After that, he would reinvent himself, co-founding a company called Intercontinental Assets Group. He would brand himself as a high-level financial bounty hunter that was helping clients recover stolen money. And clearly things went well for him, because by the mid-80s, Epstein would be jet-setting between Europe and the Middle East, boasting about connections to intelligence agencies and carrying a fraudulent Austrian passport. The way he was moving like a spy or a mobster made a lot of sense, and soon, his most lucrative business opportunity yet would emerge, the opportunity to manage the money of a billionaire. But unfortunately, that job was already taken. But lucky for Epstein, the role would suddenly become available following a suspicious and cold-blooded murder.
Is there anything honest about this man? Like, does he have anything redeemable about him? He gets all these jobs just from who he knows, not what he knows. He's not qualified for any of them. Kicked out of a school he worked for flirting with girls, showing up at parties with underage drinking as an adult man, lying at his job on Wall Street, doing it like fucking insider trade. Like, what do you and then all of this while he's accused of being a Israeli spy. Like, what do you do? There's nothing redeemable about this man. He's a terrible human being from top to fucking bottom.
Before Jeffrey Epstein became the gatekeeper to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, that role belonged to Arthur Shapiro. As personal attorney and financial advisor to Victoria's Secret billionaire Les Wexner, Shapiro controlled the empire's finances, but by 1985, his control was beginning to crack. By then, Shapiro was under intense IRS investigation for allegedly hiding money in questionable tax shelters. In fact, he was scheduled to testify before a federal grand jury the very next day, but Shapiro never made it to the stand. Instead, on the morning of March the 6th, 1985, Shapiro was seen sitting in his red BMW, parked at a cemetery of all places, sharing breakfast with an unidentified man. Then, moments later, that same man, dressed in all black, wearing a broad-brimmed hat and apparently walking with a distinct limp, began chasing Shapiro from the vehicle while firing a handgun, grazing his hip and arm. After cornering him at the entrance of a nearby condo, the gunman fired 2 close-range shots to Shapiro's head before stealing Shapiro's BMW and using it to flee the scene. By the following morning, that car was discovered in a nearby parking lot, wiped clean of fingerprints, all the hallmarks of a professional mob hit. And to this day, that murder remains officially unsolved. But still, the timing was impossible to ignore. Notably, a suppressed police report would later point to alleged organized crime connections within Les Wexner's own circle, and suggesting the possibility that the killing was actually financed in order to prevent damaging information coming out on Wexner during Shapiro's expected testimony. Almost immediately then, Jeffrey Epstein, a college dropout with no formal financial credentials or awards other than being a celebrated bachelor, would suddenly assume control of Wexner's 10-figure fortune. The chilling nature of this bond was eventually hinted at in leaked emails years later, when Epstein had claimed in messages that Wexner owed him a debt for their years of, quote, gang stuff. Decades later, during a 2026 deposition, Wexner insisted that the phrase gang stuff was merely just shorthand for confidential business dealings.
Jeffrey was like a Brooklyn guy. And he, in hindsight, he didn't use words like have a confidential discussion or my opinion or this is secret or private or confidential, personal things that lawyers or accountants might use in normal language. He would say this is gang stuff.
Clearly, but from that point forward, Wexner granted Epstein the sweeping and unprecedented authority over his wealth, launching a partnership that would last 2 decades, all beginning with that brutal mob-style hit.
But Leslie Wexner is a great example here. Leslie Wexner owns Victoria's Secret and L Brands, right? He's the bank that bankrolled Jeffrey Epstein. And I was saying earlier that he signed the power of attorney over to Jeffrey Epstein so that Jeffrey Epstein was able to sell his assets, manage his assets, buy on his behalf. He could sell Victoria's Secret without Leslie Wexner in the room or even his knowledge if he wanted to, because that's the level of power of attorney that he signed over to Jeffrey Epstein when he was his money manager.
As a result of meeting Wexner and taking over his finances after Shapiro's murder, Epstein's fortunes rose suddenly and dramatically, with Epstein having secured full power of attorney over one of the richest men in the world. With that single document, Epstein could borrow enormous sums of money on Wexner's behalf, sign his tax returns, hire staff, and even orchestrate major corporate transactions. And from there, the rewards became staggering. Gradually, Epstein took control of extraordinary assets, including a Manhattan mansion and a $100 million Ohio estate that had once belonged to Wexner himself. At the same time, he began systematically pushing Wexner's longtime friends and senior advisors, tightening his grip on the empire. Initially, some believed that Epstein's rise was just the product of his still unexplained financial brilliance. Later, however, newly released files would suggest that his position may well have been tied to a secret relationship with Wexner, with some articles referring to them as boyfriends.
Did you personally have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Are you aware that others have claimed that you had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Whatever the true nature of their bond, Epstein
Yeah, they fucked. Yeah.
He clearly understood that his position offered more than just financial leverage. By the mid-1990s, he was leveraging his association with Victoria's Secret to present himself as a high-level talent scout for models. In May 1997, that facade allegedly drew a 27-year-old model named Alicia Arden to a Santa Monica hotel room under the promise of a catalog audition. But once she arrived, the audition story collapsed, and she later alleged that Epstein had attempted to her. Even so, despite the growing pattern of accusations, Epstein appeared untouchable. In fact, at least two senior executives later claimed that they had uncovered his recruitment tactics and personally warned Les Wexner. Yet no meaningful action ever followed, and Epstein's access remained intact. But as Epstein's empire continued to grow, another suspicious empire was about to fall apart, with one of the castaways later becoming Epstein's top enforcer and recruiter. By 1990, Jeffrey Epstein had embedded himself within the world's most elite financial circles, and once again, a highly suspicious death would change everything. At the center of that shift stood Robert Maxwell, the British media tycoon with a boatload of money, power, and respect all over the world. And his notorious daughter would be named Ghislaine Maxwell, and she would benefit from much of the connections that her father had built up over the decades. Publicly, Robert commanded a vast international publishing empire.
I'm quite determined and confident that I shall be successful in getting the Mirror newspaper group.
However, privately, he was siphoning hundreds of millions of pounds from his employees' pension funds to prop up his collapsing businesses. Amid mounting financial pressure, Maxwell reportedly turned to Epstein to help shield vast sums of money from creditors and tax authorities. But then, on November the 5th, 1991, everything would change. While sailing near the Canary Islands aboard his $15 million yacht named Lady Ghislaine after his daughter, Robert Maxwell would vanish, and days later, his naked body would be recovered from the Atlantic Ocean.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the many hundreds of people who have sent messages of support.
Although an official inquiry concluded that he likely suffered a heart attack and fell aboard, an autopsy would note significant head and spinal injuries not directly attributable to drowning. Some believe that he had taken as nearly £2 billion in hidden debt was about to surface. Others suspected that he had been silenced before he could expose sensitive financial secrets that would have caused damage that went far beyond his own empire. Declassified intelligence documents later fueled speculation further, suggesting that Maxwell had long-standing ties to international intelligence agencies, MI6 in the UK, the KGB in Russia, and the Mossad in Israel. Years later, Epstein himself would allegedly claim in an email that the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad had murdered Maxwell after he had attempted to blackmail them for £400 million. In the chaotic aftermath of Maxwell's death, his daughter Ghislaine resurfaced in New York at Jeffrey Epstein's side. While she had lost her father's wealth, she still possessed his unprecedented access to the global power elite, and together they formed a mutually beneficial alliance where Ghislaine opened doors to presidents, royalty, and industry leaders, and Epstein would supply the capital, or perhaps other things that these powerful men wanted access to. Between 1997 and 2007 alone, court records would later show that Epstein had transferred more than $30 million to Ghislaine, Their relationship became romantic and carried into the late 1990s, with Les Wexner stating that Epstein had once even intended to marry her.
When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
Must have been about 1990. Jeffrey wanted me to meet the person.
Just peeped. He has a leather vest on. That needs to be noted in some of these documents. What you guys in here talking about? Bro said, I fuck with the Irish, I fuck with Mexicans, and I fuck with Congolese people. Those three groups have never treated me badly. You guys knew, like, Bees, I was moving furniture a week ago. Alright, bro, I'm not gonna lie. I understand why you do this. It's kind of fun, low key. Big ass L-shaped couch had me and two other dudes, like the Three Stooges, trying to fit it through a door. It's satisfying. It's indeed satisfying. I don't move furniture anymore, though. Do not fuck with Romanians. I don't fuck with Norwegian. What? Like, bro, bro said Romanians are thieves. Oh my god. Get out of here. Get out of here. Yeah, I'm going back to this video. You guys are not talking about shit.
By 2000, according to Epstein, the romantic element with Ghislaine ended amicably, but the business end of their partnership would continue. Publicly, they were photographed on private jets together and at elite gatherings, but privately, something far darker was unfolding, and as early as 1995, the first documented cracks would appear. Artist Maria Farmer was hired to work at Epstein's Manhattan mansion, and soon observed a steady flow of girls allegedly recruited by Maxwell. Then, in the summer of 1996, while serving as an artist in residence at Wexner's Ohio estate, Farmer alleged that she was by both Epstein and Maxwell.
On the night this photograph was taken by Maxwell, Farmer alleges in her complaint that Maxwell and Epstein her there. How are you doing at that moment?
Oh, I was hysterical.
Farmer alleges in her complaint that when she tried to flee the following day, she was not allowed to leave. She claims a member of Wexner's staff warned her.
His exact words were, "You're not going anywhere. You are never leaving. You are never leaving."
Although she escaped with her father's help, she later described receiving an implied threat from Ghislaine herself.
Farmer alleges Maxwell threatened to destroy her reputation in the art world, and in one phone call, she believes, threatened her life.
She says, "You're going out to jog on the West Side Highway every day, and I know this. You need to be very careful because there's so many ways to die there. So you have to be really careful. Look over your shoulder."
Shortly afterwards, Farmer learned that her sister Annie had allegedly been subjected to a massage by Maxwell at Epstein's New Mexico ranch while Epstein watched. Despite filing formal complaints with the NYPD and the FBI in 1996, the sisters encountered a wall of silence. Astonishingly, those early reports remained buried for decades, only resurfacing publicly years later in 2025. And with these, and perhaps other damaging allegations brushed under the rug, this allowed Epstein and Maxwell to continue building an international operation protected by the very elites that they were compromising. For nearly a decade, Jeffrey Epstein moved as if he was untouchable, operating within the highest levels of global power, and he was splitting his time between numerous locations like his Manhattan townhouse, his Palm Beach mansion, his Zorro ranch in New Mexico, and his private island Little St. James in the British Virgin Islands, all while socializing with the world's most powerful men. During Bill Clinton's presidency alone, visitor logs would show that Epstein had entered the White House at least 17 times. Behind that access, however, prosecutors would later allege there was a pattern of systemic that involved a revolving door of vulnerable girls, and it would appear that was occurring at every single property belonging to Epstein, and one of the darkest locations for this operation was his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, an operation which was connected to a number of suspicious deaths and has led to calls to investigate and possibly even excavate from the property, with some even believing that Epstein may well have even been an uncaught New Mexico serial killer who left over 10 women buried in the desert there. In 1993, Jeffrey Epstein purchased a 7,000-acre property outside Stanley, New Mexico, known as the Zorro Ranch. It flew under the radar during the later investigations into at his infamous Palm Beach residence that led to serious charges. Unlike his Manhattan townhouse or private island, that ranch offered near-total isolation, complete with a private airstrip.
That shit is in the middle of nowhere. He just said they have a private airstrip.
Manhattan townhouse or private island, that ranch offered near total isolation, complete with a private airstrip and miles of desert shielding it from public view. Years later, reporting began to shed light on what twisted plans Epstein allegedly envisioned for the property. A 2019 investigation revealed that he had discussed plans to, quote, the human race with his DNA, telling scientists and associates that he wanted hundreds of women to bear his children at the ranch. Meanwhile, victim testimony added another dark layer, with victims such as Rena O referring to the ranch as a cloning lab.
He extensively went on for about 3 hours talking about, like, he called it his cloning lab. He was obsessed with genetics. eugenics and science, and he talked about selective breeding a lot.
Other women like Juliet Bryant would allege that she experienced unexplained medical procedures at this property. Even more mysterious were the large industrial vents around the property that made it seem like there was some kind of larger facility built underneath it.
When I showed some of the footage and pictures to a friend of mine that did security in the Air Force, as soon as he saw the mesa that the mansion was on, so that looks like it is built like something is underneath it. This time I noticed a whole series of vents on the south side of the mansion that look like industrial gratings for like air conditioning and heating vents and things like that on big industrial buildings, except this is a mansion. This just should ostensibly is a house, but these are big, like in some cases like 10 or 12 foot by 3 foot wide steel grating.
In 2026, newly surfaced emails reportedly referenced discussions about freezing eggs and reproductive plans. Separate diary excerpts attributed to an alleged victim would describe a being taken away under Ghislaine Maxwell's supervision and with Epstein named as the father. Additional correspondence mentioned claims from unidentified informants that Epstein had offered her financial incentives tied to for black market purposes. Crucially, that same email would actually mention John of God, a Brazilian cult leader who was later convicted in 2019 and sentenced to over 400 years for his offenses. Beyond these biological experiments, the email originally sent in 2019 resurfaced in February of 2026, alleging that bodies were actually buried in the hills surrounding Epstein's Zorro Ranch.
Eddie Aragon says it was early in the morning in November 2019 when he got this email from someone claiming they were a former staffer at Zorro Ranch. Writing, "Did you know somewhere in the hills outside of the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Both died by strangulations."
I got the email. I was startled.
The emailer says they had 7 videos, but never actually sent the footage, asking Aragon for digital currency Bitcoin.
More chillingly, there were also 11 unsolved murders of women who were found nearby in West Mesa, New Mexico, that authorities discovered in 2009.
The more investigators dug, the deeper the West Mesa mystery became. 11 women, one of them pregnant, all buried nude sometime between 2001 and 2005. Investigators quickly identified 7 of the women, but there were still 4 Jane Does. Months went by without any more IDs, until now.
The victims aged to 32 would actually disappear between 2003 and 2005, many of them being vulnerable women involved in sex work and battling addiction. 8 additional women who vanished between 2003 and 2006 are believed by investigators to be connected to the same perpetrator or perpetrators. And one of the last women to disappear during that period, Vanessa Reed, would vanish in June 2006, just weeks before the FBI formally launched its federal investigation into Epstein, at which point these disappearances would suddenly stop. Yet 17 years later, as of 2026, New Mexico police still have no answers.
Well, that's right, Doug and Shelley. Police definitely say that they are still on this case. You can see that there are monuments all out here. This one says in memory of Michelle Valdez and her unborn angel. And then you can see where there's just flowers and different monuments placed throughout the park. Now, with that said, we did have the chance to talk to investigators, and we asked them, why is this case so difficult to solve?
I want you to know that this remains an active and open investigation, and we are committed to finding the truth.
That truth dates back at least 17 years. On February 2nd, 2009, Christine Ross and her dog were on a walk. That's when Ross's dog found a bone. That bone determined to be a human bone and led to the remains of 11 women and 1 unborn child.
So when the bones were found in 2009, yes, it was a shock to our community and to the police department.
Liz Thompson is a retired APD homicide sergeant who worked this case for nearly a decade, along with Ida Lopez.
We, have persons of interest that we're looking into, and we continue. So I just don't want it to be out there where we're losing tips because people assume that we've got this.
And this motherfucker Epstein has so many government ties and people in high places, bro. They probably couldn't. Nobody can search that bitch if they even wanted to. They had some. Who was that one guy getting interviewed that got the email? It was like a land commissioner or something. If it was anybody else, they would have searched that bitch top to fucking bottom. But because it's him, nah. And Trump's president, yeah, bro, that should never get searched. That should never get searched. Every president touches kids and does some weird shit, bro. Nope. What y'all talking about? We hate communism. I feel like Jeffrey Epstein couldn't fight. Yeah, he definitely never had to fight in his life. Our national prosecutor started an Epstein case. Ronda Rousey has apparently said that the UFC has horrible pain that champions like Valentina Shevchenko are sending pictures, selling pictures on OnlyFans. I'm not surprised. The GOAT Theodore Roosevelt, though, I had an English presentation about the big Velt. He was a chud. Didn't he get shot like while giving a speech and kept doing it? Oh, there's a bunch of jokes that could be made about that. Please make a funny joke about that. There we go. That's the law.
There was no clothing.
He was not a chud. Theodore Roosevelt was a chud. He's a chud. He was a fucking chad, bro. He's a chud. He waxed the goat. He was the goat.
Physical evidence.
Police say
Fuck
there are
Theodore
8 women
Roosevelt.
still missing
Fuck 'em.
from 2003 to 2006. According to investigators,
He said, "You do not even compare to him. Don't compare me to him. I don't give a fuck." How many followers does Theodore Roosevelt have on Twitch? Oh, okay. How many people subbed during his speech? Oh, okay. Exactly. 3 minutes of ads. What are we talking about? What are we talking about?
cases share
How many? Theodore Roosevelt has never ran ads. Can you follow Theodore Roosevelt on Instagram? You'd be in your chair. You'd be laying in your chair. You couldn't stream and take a bullet though? What? Catch that bitch like that anyway, and I'd sit there and ground it to dust and sprinkle it. Theodore Roosevelt. His name is Teddy, and we're calling him that, Teddy.
As the West Mesa
Theodore.
victims.
Law enforcement has not
With a
publicly
monocle.
connected these crimes to Epstein, but still, the geographic and timeline overlaps are deeply concerning. And as questions about what might have happened in those deserts lingered without definitive answers, attention would gradually shift from the isolated grounds of the Zorro Ranch to the powerful figures who were moving in Epstein's circle. But despite the New Mexico disappearances slowing down as the feds began investigating
Bill
Epstein,
Clinton is literally like him and Jeffrey Epstein literally like fucking just like always together. Yo, Bill, can you get a grip? My God, Bill Clinton is impossible to defend. He is undefendable. What is his fucking problem? He has a daughter, bro. You have a daughter and a wife, and you are just. I'm not gonna lie, they gotta nuke Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton gotta get fucking
unfortunately be vulnerable women who would lose their lives right up to the point where he would face justice. By the mid-2000s, Ruslana Korshenova was one of fashion's most recognizable young stars. Discovered at 17 in Kazakhstan, she was nicknamed the Russian Rapunzel for her long chestnut hair and ethereal look, and she would quickly become a runaway regular for brands like Marc Jacobs and Nina Ricci, traveling internationally for major shows. However, in June 2006, her name would appear in a far more controversial context. Flight logs later showed that on June the 7th, 2006, the 18-year-old boarded a private jet owned by Jeffrey Epstein. And according to those records, that plane was headed to Epstein's Island on Little St. James in the US Virgin Islands, with the passenger list also including Epstein himself and his assistant Sarah Kellen. The trip would occur just weeks before Epstein's 2006 arrest in Florida, but what, if anything, transpired during that visit has never been publicly established. And unfortunately, Ruslana would never be able to speak about what happened on that island, because 2 years after that flight, a suspicious tragedy would strike when on June the 28th, 2008, then 20-year-old Ruslana would fall from the 9th floor balcony of her Wall Street apartment. Authorities reported no signs of foul play and claimed that she had. However, she would leave no note behind, and friends and family would question this conclusion. A former boyfriend said that she had shown no alarming signs of behavior hours earlier, and a close friend would recall that she had recently returned from Paris and was planning her 21st birthday. Also, her mother had consistently rejected the official findings, and in July 2010, an email later attributed to Epstein would actually reference Ruslana, blaming her boyfriend for her death because apparently he believed in alternative medicine. The same release materials would include a saved image containing a disturbing quote attributed to Korshenova, though no context is provided. The quote simply reading, "Love does not take away from one in order to give to another." Separately, a 2014 investigation by journalist Peter Pomerantsev suggested that she had been involved with the Rose of the World, a controversial self-development group that critics would describe as cult-like. But regardless, while the goings-on at Epstein's Zorro Ranch appear to have been ignored extensively, it would be Epstein's actions at his Palm Beach, Florida residence that were so brazen and damaging to the community that the authorities would eventually have no choice but to step in. But once again, as the investigation progressed, people would continue to die suspiciously, both before and after. In addition to Epstein's New Mexico Zorro Ranch, at his Palm Beach property in Florida, countless more girls would be sucked into his orbit and systemically. Perhaps the most famous one of all was Virginia Giuffre, who grew up in an household and cycled through foster care. She was homeless by 14 and unfortunately the kind of vulnerable young runaway that would be the textbook target for the Epstein operation. And eventually, she encountered a man named Ron Eppinger, an associate of Epstein who ran a South Florida modeling agency, later described in court records as a recruitment front for. He would eventually be investigated and arrested and was facing up to 10 years, but ultimately he only received 21 months in prison alongside a $6,000 fine. And after Eppinger's arrest, Virginia Giuffre would secure a job at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Florida, and it was here that the then 16-year-old Virginia was allegedly approached by Ghislaine Maxwell with an offer to work as a traveling masseuse for Epstein. Giuffre would later allege that she was and between 2000 and 2002 across Epstein's.
Bro, Ghislaine should have been put to fucking death too. She's not no fucking better. Like, as a woman, shouldn't you feel some kind of sympathy? You know what I mean? Have some kind of fucking heart. What's wrong with all this? What is wrong with these people? Money can't make you. There's no way you're just like, for X amount of millions of dollars, you would just sell all of your fucking morals and have all of these people like hurt and abused and everything. Like, what the fuck is your problem? And she, like, her dad had millions of dollars. I know you got some of that shit after he was fucking killed. Like, you need that much more greedy, nasty. These people are not humans. These people are not.
Properties and to some of the world's most powerful men, including Prince Andrew, billionaire hedge fund manager Glenn Dubin, powerhouse attorney Alan Dershowitz, famously known for representing O.J. Simpson and later Epstein and Trump, the governor of New Mexico, and the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson, Marvin Minsky, the MIT scientist regarded as the father.
It's always a motherfucker named Marvin who looks like this too. Always old motherfucker named Marvin, hair like that, up to.
Of artificial intelligence, and Jean-Luc Brunel, the MC2 modeling executive who was later accused of playing a central role in managing Epstein's broader network. By 2002, Virginia Giuffre would leave Epstein's circle after marrying her husband Robert and relocating to Australia. According to Virginia, Epstein would openly brag about Jean-Luc Brunel delivering over 1,000 girls to him, and she would also describe hidden cameras inside Epstein's homes, as well as alleging that he discussed using recordings of influential figures as leverage, explicitly telling her that she was a pawn in a scheme designed to ensure the world's most powerful and influential figures owed him favors. But meanwhile, in Palm Beach, authorities started acting on tips in 2004 about young girls visiting Epstein's estate, and by July 2006, the FBI launched Operation Leap Year, a federal investigation into Epstein's activities. However, in a detail that would later raise eyebrows, Ron Eppinger, the man who had first recruited Virginia Giuffre, would die in a local hospital just 2 months before the federal investigation formally begun, and publicly available records did not specify a cause of death. This was a huge red flag and the first of many highly suspicious deaths connected to the initial investigation into Epstein's operation to women. Perhaps if he was still alive, Eppinger might have flipped on Epstein to save himself, collaborating with the authorities to expose the operation. He's certainly the kind of weak link that a mob-connected abuse think nothing of making disappear, but with basically no information publicly available on his death, this is clearly a huge question mark that those in power would rather you forgot. But his untimely demise may well have been a big part of what happened next, as ultimately, despite the mounting evidence gathered during the investigation, in 2007, Epstein secured what would later be infamously described as a sweetheart deal, as it appeared that strings were pulled behind the scenes, allowing him to plea out to reduce charges of soliciting a for resulting in a just 18-month prison sentence, which he only served 13, along with a work release that allowed him to leave the prison during that time.
On June 30th, 2008, Jeffrey Epstein, a Palm Beach multimillionaire hedge fund manager, received what might have been the most lenient plea deal for a serial sex offender in U.S. history. The Miami Herald identified over 60 of his victims, just young middle and high school girls at the time of the abuse. Epstein pleaded guilty in state court.
Middle and high school girls. Does he have children? Did he have children? Middle and high school girls. Like, what? Like, why are motherfuckers so like? You're a multimillionaire. You can literally have like any model you want, and she'll just literally come over there and do whatever you want because you're rich, bro. Like, no, motherfucker has to have kids, bro. Have to like and kill people and everything else. What is your fucking deal? I hope he's actually dead. No bullshit. I hope that I know they faked his death, but like I hope he's actually
Epstein's
dead.
punishment was like
Died
that
a
of no other
painful
sex offender in Florida. He had a private space in a vacant wing of the Palm Beach County stockade, but records show he spent limited time there. He was allowed to go to his
An
private
awakening
West
needs
Palm
to
Beach
happen
office,
for
where he spent
society
up to 12 hours
to
a day,
function
6
with
days a
normal
week,
people
often
at the top
accepting
and bottom,
visitors,
bro.
including female friends.
With a slap on the wrist and just over a year of relaxed punishment, Epstein was able to continue a empire
The
with
world
little
will
oversight.
constantly
However,
go
once
to
again behind the
shit.
scenes, as
The
years
world
went
will
on,
endlessly go worse and worse and farther to shit if people like this are at the top of it, bro. Something has to change. What's going on, Huncho? You guys over here talking about genuinely murder Ghislaine Maxwell? Like, bro, she's terrible. There was some video somebody just walked up to her and like recorded her recently. They were like, Ghislaine, and she looked up and responded. He's like, are you Ghislaine? She's like, no. Where is it?
More people connected to his
She's
charges.
a fucking idiot. She's not good for anything. Where is it? She is a fucking dumbass. Show the video. I don't care about all these goofy ass pictures of this bitch. No, I don't want to give no fucking cookies. The hell up about cookies. A video falsely claiming to show, and of course it's BBC News posting that.
Ghislaine? Do I know you?
This video claims to show Ghislaine Maxwell walking free in Canada. It's amassed millions of views and fueled conspiracy.
Get this bitch off of my screen! Shut up!
A convicted sex offender isn't really imprisoned in the US. But the video is an AI fake. Here's how we know. If you hit pause at the first second of the video, you can see a woman who does not look like Maxwell. We blurred her face to protect her identity. Later on in the video, the woman's face is swapped to resemble Maxwell. That face swap bears a greater resemblance to Maxwell.
This bitch, you're AI. Shut up. You're AI. That's the same video you got. You guys get it. That looked like her.
Wind up dead under suspicious circumstances.
W alert.
When Alfredo Rodriguez died in 2014, whatever secrets he carried about the inner workings of Epstein's Palm Beach mansion died with him, because for years, Rodriguez had served as Epstein's house manager with access to his daily operations.
Kept any pictures of the young women who would come to give massages on her laptop.
Yes, ma'am.
And you saw those pictures?
Yes.
He was privy to all of Epstein's powerful visitors, as well as the infamous Little Black Book, a contact list that apparently contained hundreds of elite contacts of Epstein's, along with contacts for his network of women that he was luring into his network. Apparently, in fear of his life, as investigations into Epstein had just started, Rodriguez took Epstein's Little Black Book with him as life insurance. But ironically, it might be that his life insurance ended up actually being his death warrant. Years later, in 2009, Alfredo attempted to sell Epstein's Black Book for $50,000 to what would ultimately turn out to be an undercover FBI agent.
Okay. Who created this book?
Epstein himself.
This book was made by Epstein?
All his Mercedes, all his planes, they were supposed to have this. He made all of these disappear.
So he had a copy of these for everywhere, everywhere he was.
Of course he said, I don't have it.
He would be sentenced to 18 months in prison for obstruction of justice, ironically the very same amount of prison time that Epstein received for crimes against women in his controversial 2008 plea deal. And after his release, Rodriguez would quickly fade from public view, but then in December of 2014, he would die at age 60, apparently the result of an extremely rare form of cancer caused by exposure to asbestos. His death was ruled as natural, but his widow would give reporters a chilling statement saying that he died with so many secrets and that he knew about everyone, including the prince. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be the last person connected with Epstein's 2008 charges that would pass away in the following years.
I'm sure they killed him. I know they killed his ass. Rare form of mesothelioma. Yeah, right, bro. They injected him with that shit. They got that shit in a vial. Some dude working in a lab underground looked like this. He looked at that shit like that and blew a fucking tranquilizer dart from halfway across a fucking through on a highway while driving alongside him in a different lane of him through the fucking window. That shit hit him in the neck and he thought it was a mosquito. The job has been done. He said some shit like the eagle's in the nest.
Jeffrey Epstein had faded from daily headlines, but legally the pressure was building. In June 2014, a Florida federal judge would rule that two victims identified as Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2 could see details about
B's Theodore Roosevelt went to Harvard. You did not. That's 1-0. Okay, now say something I did that he didn't do and then make it 1-1. Harvard. He went to Harvard when? He said Doc stemmed his ass. Cats in the box.
Epstein's 2008 plea bargain. And
the
then
cookie's been dipped.
2014, Virginia Giuffre added claims that she was
the nails have been clipped.
Ghislaine Maxwell to Prince Andrew in a high-profile lawsuit. The next
they probably had some gestures. Some dude did like this in his nose twice.
A defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell after Maxwell publicly called her a liar. From here, the lawsuit and evidence discovery would drag Maxwell's name back into international headlines. One person who knew that family well was Wendy Lee, who had dated Robert Maxwell for 7 years in the 1980s and later wrote about his life and influence. However, just as renewed scrutiny and legal pressure began circling around the Maxwell name once again, Lee's own story took a tragic turn. In May 2016, she too would fall from the balcony of her London apartment, and police once again concluded that she had taken her. Yet just like the model Ruslana Korshenova, who plunged to her death after being flown to Epstein's Island, that ruling seemed to be contradicted by the plans that she had recently put into motion. She had just listed her home for sale 2 weeks earlier and had spoken about being excited for her plans to travel the world, signaling a new chapter in her life rather than a sudden ending. However, at the same time, she was apparently grieving the recent loss of her mother, a personal heartbreak that friends said deeply affected her, though they did describe her as publicly upbeat and forward-looking. But then, less than a year later, on May the 30th, 2017, another Epstein's victim's life would be cut suspiciously short. Lee Patrick, better known as Sky to friends, was attending Wellington Christian School when she first came into contact with Jeffrey Epstein's circle. In 2003, at just 16 years old, she was taken to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion after being invited to what she believed was a party. According to her account, the friend who brought her there quickly left, and Patrick was led inside by a woman she believed worked for Epstein. There, she said she encountered Epstein wearing and that he handed her $300. In 2008, as Epstein finalized his controversial plea deal, Patrick received a $50,000 settlement that included a confidentiality clause. In the years that followed, her life unraveled into repeated arrests for drug offenses and probation violations, alongside multiple stints in rehab as she battled addiction. Then, on the morning of May 30th, 2017, housekeeping staff at the Treetops Motel in West Palm Beach knocked on her door and received no response. Sky's body, partly covered by a sheet, was later found by the crew, who had to saw off the door handle to get inside, and according to the sheriff's report, her body was covered in bruises, abrasions, and open wounds. Soon after, deputies located the man who had been renting the motel room where Sky's body was found, and he would tell investigators that he had encountered her while driving out of the motel property as she ran down the street. According to his account, she appeared beaten and was visibly under the influence of drugs, and he said that she agreed to return to his room so she could shower and clean herself up. Once inside, he told deputies that he witnessed Patrick using drugs while seated on the toilet, explaining that she had concealed small baggies filled with a white powder inside her bra. After she lost consciousness, he said that he flushed the remaining drugs down the toilet and discarded her glass pipe in the trash. Before leaving to check out, he stated that she was snoring on the bed and he assumed she would eventually wake up, a curious detail that would seem to contradict the narrative that she had bolted the door behind herself, warranting the use of a saw to gain entry. But Lee Sky Patrick would become another one of many publicly known Epstein victims that would tragically pass away in the years that followed, and her death would officially be listed as an. But the next suspicious death would happen almost exactly a year later, once again tied to Epstein's Palm Beach crimes. Only this time, it would be the very man who had been investigating Epstein's crimes that would lose his life.
They killed a detective?
At the center of the original Palm Beach investigation was Joseph Ricari, the detective who led the 2005 to 2006 investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Alongside Police Chief Michael Rita, he identified dozens of victims and helped build the case against pressure from then State Attorney Barry Kreischer to drop it. Meanwhile, Ricari and his colleagues later said that they became aware that they were being followed and that their trash was disappearing, and that private investigators hired by Epstein's legal team was examining their personal lives. After retiring in 2013 as one of the department's most decorated detectives, his name nevertheless remained closely tied to the Epstein case. And then on May the 25th, 2018, Joseph Ricari would die at age 50, his death being publicly described vaguely as just the result of a brief illness, with no additional details being released. However, other unverified sources suggested that he had died from a heart attack at 50. Notably, his passing came just 1 year before Epstein's 2019 arrest, and later, when Epstein-related files were made public, it would emerge that Epstein had directly referenced Ricari's death in an email, suggesting even he believed it to be suspicious, even comparing it to a 2017 death of a Russian diplomat, Mergias Shurinsky, who was found dead in a pool after suffering an acute heart attack. However, Shurinsky at the time was one out of 9 high-ranking Russian diplomats that had died in the span of 9 months suspiciously following Trump's election under similar circumstances.
I told you about Russia's UN ambassador Vitaly Churkin, who died suddenly in his New York office last week. This makes him the 8th Russian diplomat to die unexpectedly in the last 4 months. He died quickly. He wasn't sick until the day he died. The Kremlin very quickly called it a heart attack. But not only is Churkin's death strange, it's strikingly similar to the death of Russia's ambassador to India, Alexander Kadaykin, on January 27th, also called a heart attack by the Kremlin, and the death of a Russian diplomat to Greece, Andrei Malinin, on January 9th, the Kremlin also calling that a heart attack.
Now, it's unclear in that email if Epstein is inferring that Putin, Trump, or even himself might have played a role in the death of the detective that had hoped to put him away for good. But either way, Joseph Reccari was yet another name tied to Epstein that would have proved an important resource in any future investigation. And now he too was dead before his time, and before he could once again make a difference in putting away this prolific predator. But regardless, it wouldn't take long before the man himself, connected to all of these people who died, would run out of time too. And unsurprisingly, the death of Jeffrey Epstein himself would be the most suspicious of all. On July the 6th, 2019, when Jeffrey Epstein landed in New Jersey after a flight from Paris, federal agents were already waiting on the tarmac. By nightfall, he was in custody on sweeping charges that threatened to pull powerful names of his potential clients into open court.
So if he's looking at life in prison, now may be the time to roll over on people, and who knows what type of people may be involved in this conspiracy.
Great point. This guy's a billionaire with a lot of wealthy and high-profile friends. Should those people be worried about Epstein taking them down with him, Alex?
2 days later, in a Manhattan courtroom, he pleaded not guilty and was denied bail. Within hours, he was processed into the Metropolitan Correctional Center and placed inside the Special Housing Unit, aka the SHU, the most secure tier in the prison. And almost immediately, he was assigned a cellmate named Nicholas Tartaglione, a former police officer that was serving multiple life sentences for murder.
U.S. attorney said Tartaglione killed 4 men in April of 2016. Martin Luna was strangled, targeted for a $200,000 drug debt. 2 of his nephews and a friend were with Luna and allegedly shot dead to stop them from talking. Their bodies were found buried at an Orange County farm rented by Tartaglione.
He was also a man who had openly expressed hatred towards child. Unsurprisingly, before the end of the month, Epstein was found injured in his cell with marks on his neck in what officials described as a possible attempt, though Epstein reportedly told his lawyers that he had been attacked.
Epstein was found curled up in a fetal position inside his cell here at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in Manhattan. He had marks on his neck and was reportedly crying and semi-conscious. Epstein is claiming he was beaten up by another inmate and called a child. Another theory, it's a scam concocted by Epstein to get a transfer out of the MCC, notorious for its harsh conditions.
His cellmate Nicholas Tartaglione denied harming him and was later cleared by an internal investigation. Yet Tartaglione would go on to make an eerie and chilling statement that he had been placed in that cell for a reason, and he even later made explosive claims inferring that the Trump administration had specifically wanted Epstein dead. In response to this alleged attempt, Epstein was placed on watch for 6 days before being returned to the SHU under a strict protocol that apparently required him to have a cellmate at all times and to be checked every 30 minutes by guards. On August the 8th, just 2 days before his death, he signed a new will transferring his estate, reportedly worth $600 million, into a trust. Then on August the 9th, his next cellmate, Ephraim Stone Reyes, was transferred out and no replacement was assigned. Later that evening, after meeting his lawyers who described him as upbeat, he was escorted back to his SHU cell at 7:59 p.m. As the night progressed, required counts were missed at 10 p.m. and through the night in violation of the jail's normal procedure, and Epstein was not checked every 30 minutes like he was supposed to be. Shortly after 6:30 a.m. on August the 10th, as breakfast was distributed, Epstein was found unresponsive, kneeling beside his bunk with a strip of bedsheets tied to the frame and wrapped around his neck. Despite CPR attempts, he was later pronounced dead, yet still allegedly taken to a hospital. And only a few hours later, at 8:16 a.m., a suspicious post was made by an anonymous 4chan user who typed, "Don't ask me how I know, but Epstein just died an hour ago from cardiac arrest. Screen cap this." It was the first public indication that Epstein had been killed, beating the mainstream media outlets by 38 minutes. This anonymous user would make a total of 4 posts, according to 4chan's response to the subpoena. The one that was perhaps the most shocking of all would read, "You guys, I'm shaking. I think they switched his body." The 4chan post was later linked to a guard at the prison, and in the days that followed, the official autopsy would claim that Epstein.
See what this is.
One that was perhaps the most shocking of all.
Not saying anything after this. Please do not try to dox me. That's literally like, you're going to get doxxed after saying that. But last night after 4:15 count, they took him medical in a wheelchair, front cuffed, but not one triage nurse says that they spoke to him. Next thing we know, a trip van shows up. We do not do releases on the weekends unless a judge orders it. Next thing we know, he's put in a single man cell and blank. Here's the thing, the trip van did not sign in and we did not record the plate number, and a guy in a green dress military outfit was in the back of the van according to the tower guy who let him through the gate. You guys, I am shaking right now, but I think they switched him out.
All would read, "You guys, I'm shaking. I think they switched his body." The 4chan post
Probably.
was later linked to a guard at the prison, and in the days that followed, the official autopsy.
Who's this guard? Is this
body.
guard
The
alive?
4chan post
Guard
was
gotta
later...
be dead. Guard gotta be dead. Gridjalava passed on to oncoming staff member Officer Davidson, present shift staff Shakir, and Officer Joyner that inmate Reyes was going WAB and possibly may or not return, and that Epstein will be needing a cellmate upon arrival. Who is the fucking...
linked to a guard at the prison, and in the days that followed, the official autopsy would claim that Epstein had taken the first time this had happened at this facility in 21 years, which apparently claimed that it was nearly impossible there. And on August the 12th, Attorney General William Barr would publicly condemn the prison's failures while promising investigations into the death and Epstein's co-conspirators.
And then this is the guy who's the son of the guy who got Epstein like those jobs and shit.
I was appalled, and indeed the whole department was, and frankly, angry to learn of the MCC's failure to adequately secure this prisoner. We are now learning of serious irregularities at this facility that are deeply concerning and demand a thorough investigation. The FBI and the Office of Inspector General are doing just that. We will get to the bottom of what happened, and there will be accountability. Any co-conspirators should not rest easy. The victims deserve justice, and they will get it.
Yet questions would quickly mount, and Dr. Michael Baden, hired by Epstein's family, pointed to eye hemorrhaging and skin color as indications of a homicide taking place.
There usually is not any kind of hemorrhages in the eye. With homicidal strangulation, because of the increased pressure, there are hemorrhages in the eye.
And you yourself. What about your lower extremities?
When you yourself, the blood, the lividity, the blood settles down to the lower legs, and you get maroon discoloration in the front and back of the legs.
Turns purple.
Turns maroonish purple.
Okay.
Yes, maroonish purple. And this was not present here.
What color were they?
They were normal color, normal pale color of the skin.
In addition, Epstein had injuries that did not match the materials used, including multiple alleged neck fractures that he argued were more consistent with a homicide.
Because the marks on the neck is not at all typical for 90% of the time there are no fractures. Maybe 10%, 15% there could be a hyoid.
Motherfucker's teeth are brown. Not even yellow, brown.
Fracture. You don't have 3 fractures.
Jesus Christ, man. How are you a doctor? Your teeth are brown. What are you doing? Eating shit?
The weight of the body on the ligature. You have to have
maybe it's a disease, maybe sick. My fault. By ligature or by hands to get those fractures. There are a number of things on the noose. The noose is a very narrow noose, and there's a little imprint on one of the nooses of a pressure of a mark that could not have come from the smooth sheet.
On his neck, not the noose, you're saying.
That's attached, part of the noose, it's on the neck, adjacent on the skin. That looks more like an imprint from a rope rather than from a smooth bed sheet.
Meanwhile, scrutiny grew over missing surveillance footage and malfunctioning cameras on the tier.
The unit has 3 wings, each with 2 levels. Epstein was held in the upstairs L tier of his wing. That tier is accessed by a set of stairs from the central common area. Directly adjacent to those stairs is the officers' station, where on-duty corrections officers spend most of their time. The Inspector General report says several cameras in the unit were streaming a live feed to a remote location in the prison, but no one was watching them. Malfunctioning equipment meant only one camera recorded the general area. That camera captured part of the common area, including the officer's station and a sliver of the staircase leading to Epstein's cell. When the FBI released the video, they said anyone entering or attempting to enter the tier where Epstein's cell was located from the common area would have been captured by this footage. But with the primary entrance here, the pathway from the entrance to the stairs is completely out of view of the camera.
Then, attention turned to a figure captured on video at 10:30 p.m., whom the FBI identified as Officer Tova Noel carrying linens.
At 10:38 p.m., the report says someone, probably Noel, carries a bundle of bedding or clothing up the stairs. It's a rare instance the video does catch movement on the stairs, but barely. Let's see that zoomed in and in slow motion again. Several of the video forensic experts we spoke with were skeptical about the report's conclusion and thought that the video could be showing an inmate walking up the stairs. Authorities say this was the last time anyone approached his cell block until his body was discovered the next morning. Again, while the video does not contradict that, experts who viewed the video say the limited field of view makes it impossible to definitively conclude that no one used those stairs in that time period.
Although during questioning with the FBI, Officer Tova Noel denied ever bringing beddings to the cell that evening. Simultaneously, neighboring inmate Johnny Contreras and his cellmate who witnessed prison personnel discover Epstein's body saw no visible ligature marks on Epstein's neck. But after prison personnel were inside Epstein's cell, they later observed someone leaving the cell carrying a sheet tied in a loop. Shortly afterward, he would allege that staff had begun blocking sightlines and camera views to Epstein's cell, and there would also apparently be claims amongst inmates that were there that prison staff had actually murdered Epstein. Subsequently, according to prison staff, they even created a decoy body out of boxes and sheets to mislead reporters, while Epstein's actual body was transported separately to New York Downtown Hospital, something that aligned with the 4chan post that claimed that the body might have been switched out.
Sorry, in the images we have of his dead body, the ear looks so different. Not sure if you've seen that. Epstein's
Yeah, I've
ear
seen
in
that.
all photos. Exactly. So that no one could explain this. It's not a
And
small
ears are
deformity.
like fingerprints. No two people on Earth have the same ears.
Exactly. So the ears did not match. The nose did not match.
Yet the records that followed painted a far messier picture. During the investigation, a security technician
They're
warned the
saying Kiriakou might be some kind of agent too, man. Because why is he just telling all this CIA and FBI business just out in the open like that? And nobody's doing anything about it, bro.
FBI that unplugging the DVR would permanently destroy any chance of retrieving the missing footage, yet agents removed the equipment anyway. Furthermore, one of the two guards on duty had suspicious cash deposits that the FBI flagged in the days leading up to Epstein's death. In addition, the footage that existed suspiciously skipped whenever anything eventful happened to Jeffrey Epstein during his time in prison. Even months earlier when he was allegedly attacked, before the supposed camera malfunction had occurred, that also hadn't been captured.
Now, the DOJ released days and days and days of footage of this hallway, going all the way back to August 7th. But I want you to pay attention to what happens on August 9th, close to midnight. Now, I had always said that I thought that Jeffrey Epstein was murdered around midnight, a little bit after. So as you can see, right now it's at around 2,300 hours. So this would be around 11 p.m. at night. And then all of a sudden, once we get to August 10th, it's going to skip to 1 a.m. So I decided to look and see what footage they released for the month of July. And it turned out they released footage that went back to early July, the whole month, except the footage around the time that Jeffrey Epstein's injury was reported. No footage around that exists. It skips that huge chunk of time. So anything in and around things that were reported to have happened to Jeffrey Epstein are not included in any of this footage. The footage is essentially useless in that sense.
Ultimately, Epstein's death raised more questions than it answered. His untimely demise was a sigh of relief for potential future victims who would now be spared by this prolific. But it also sent chills up the spines of any survivor, accomplice, and protector that nowhere would be safe, even the most secure facilities. But even with Epstein himself gone, in the years that followed, amid cries of a cover-up, more and more people connected to him and his cases would die suspiciously. Hollywood producer Steve Bing was a wealthy financier known for films like Kangaroo Jack and for moving in elite social circles that occasionally overlapped with figures connected with Jeffrey Epstein. However, in 2019, tragedy began circling in his private life. According to Carrie Mitchum, the aunt of Bing's girlfriend, Alex Ann, in 2019, Alex Ann had urged him to make a statement through his attorney about what he knew regarding Epstein shortly before his July arrest. Then in June 2019, while the couple was staying at a hotel in Beverly Hills, an argument led Bing to ask her to spend the night elsewhere. As a result, Alex Ann went to a friend's house, but within 24 hours, she was in a coma at UCLA Medical Center following a drug and just 8 days later she would be dead. In the aftermath, Bing reportedly became convinced that her death had not been accidental, even after the death was ruled an accidental from taking Xanax laced with fentanyl. The next year, when his late girlfriend's aunt paid him a visit in May 2020, she found his large 27th floor apartment mostly empty. And then, on June the 22nd, 2020, Steve would lose his life too after falling from the 27th floor balcony of his luxury apartment in Los Angeles. And just like the many people in Epstein's orbit who just so happened to take a plunge from a tall building, this led to intense speculation as to whether he jumped or was pushed. Sources connected to Steve would suggest that he had been depressed about the lack of human contact during quarantine, while others suggested it was related to the grief that he felt about the death of his ex. Meanwhile, even as the spotlight briefly shifted to people in Epstein's dark world, the unanswered questions surrounding his death would bring renewed focus back to one of the last men who saw him alive, and you won't be surprised to know that he would suddenly wind up dead too. By By
Was
late
he down to
2020,
jail?
Jeffrey Epstein's death inside the Metropolitan Correctional Center had already become one of the most scrutinized jailhouse deaths in modern history, as malfunctioning cameras, sleeping guards, and incomplete logs fueled relentless public doubt. One person who was at the center of Epstein's final days was Ephraim Stone Reyes, the last known cellmate who was housed with Epstein before he was found dead on August 10, 2019. At the time, Reyes was a cooperating witness in a Bronx narcotics case and had been assigned to the same unit, yet on August 9th, he was suddenly transferred out the cell, and less than 24 hours later, Epstein was dead, before being assigned a cellmate, as was mandated by the prison. In the aftermath, Reyes reportedly told associates that he was personally questioned by Attorney General William Barr, although a former Barr spokesman suspiciously denied that claim. Months later, in April 2020, Reyes was released from custody as COVID-19 swept through the federal prison system. And on November the 27th, 2020, 7 months after his release, he too was dead at 51, with a source saying he contracted the virus and never fully recovered. Reyes' death would leave another huge hole in the narrative, and yet another person with the closest knowledge about what might have actually happened suddenly unable to answer. But in another very twisted set of circumstances, perhaps the man who supplied Epstein from all over the world and was most likely considered to be his most dangerous co-conspirator would wind up in jail and dead in the exact same circumstances as Epstein. And yes, once again, the cameras didn't catch this one either. In 2020, the Epstein scandal had shaken governments and royalty worldwide, yet the sweeping downfalls many expected never fully arrived. Epstein was dead, and Ghislaine Maxwell would not be arrested until July 2020, and beyond a handful of investigations, there was no broad global crackdown on alleged co-conspirators, and most cases moved slowly, quietly, or not at all. However, in France, one major figure was set to face consequences. For decades, Jean-Luc Brunel had been a powerful force in the modeling world. However, along the way, many former models had accused him of misconduct and exploitation dating back to the 1980s.
It's a meat market. You are there for the purpose of somebody wanting to take you home to bed. He is acting as a matchmaker. He's got the agency, he's got the girls. His friends say, oh, Jean-Luc, I'd like to meet some girls, or we're having a party tonight. Can you bring some girls?
And what happens if you say no?
You don't work.
But this ex-model says several years ago she went to Jean-Luc's house and didn't get away. She asked to have her voice and face disguised. He gave you a drink?
Yes.
You drank it, and then what?
I blacked out. I don't remember anything after that.
The next thing you remember
was being in this man's bed.
Who was he?
Do I have to say the name?
Say
it
the
was
name.
Jean-Luc from Karen's modeling agency.
In 2001, Dutch supermodel Karen Mulder went on French television and accused Brunel and other influential men of assault, only to later be hospitalized in a psychiatric ward by the very same men that she was accusing. Years later, in 2005, Brunel reportedly received $1 million from Epstein when launching the MC2 modeling agency. Following Epstein's legal troubles in Florida in the late 2000s, Brunel was increasingly described as a key recruiter who was funneling models into Epstein's orbit. However, it wouldn't be until after Epstein's death that Brunel fell under scrutiny. Just days after Epstein died, unsealed court documents would claim that Brunel had flown triplets out from France to be by Epstein for his birthday. Clearly, Brunel was as dangerous, if not worse, than Epstein, and had enabled untold abuse by the men at the top. By the next year, Brunel was behind bars at one of the toughest and most secure prison facilities in France. Reports suggested that he had been in contact with US authorities and was even willing to cooperate too. Perhaps this was his biggest mistake, and soon the same play that went down on Epstein would run on Jean-Luc Brunel, because before any trial could begin, and before any additional names could surface in open court, the story took a tragically familiar turn. In the early hours of February the 19th, 2022...
So if there's guys like these, and they were like, they started their ways younger, so the generation before us, there has to be an Epstein and a Jean-Luc and all this that is like the generation after. Them motherfuckers need to be found and nipped in the bud, but who are they going to be found by if it's like the same shit that was going on then that's going on now? If they just got all these other people wrapped around their fingers, and then they got all these connections in high places that gives them like all kinds of immunity. Will this shit ever, like, is this shit ever able to be stopped, or will this shit just happen endlessly until the end of time?
Jean-Luc Brunel was found inside his prison cell in circumstances suspiciously similar to Epstein's. Just like Jeffrey Epstein 2.5 years earlier, Brunel was found by his bed sheets. In both cases, the deaths occurred during the night inside high-security facilities, Epstein at Manhattan's Metropolitan Correctional Center and Brunel at Paris's La Santé prison. And in both cases, neither man was on active watch at the exact time of his death, despite prior reports of harm attempts while in custody. According to French prosecutors, guards had carried out routine night checks in the corridor, and while surveillance cameras covered the hallways, it would be reported that no cameras recorded the alleged incident, despite this being one of the toughest facilities in France. At the time of his death, Brunel was widely viewed as one of the last people who could have shed light on Epstein's network and those tied to it, and he was apparently willing to cooperate with American investigators. And then suddenly, he goes out the exact same way as Epstein, severing all ties to the network they left behind. Yet Brunel's death would not be the last time in 2022 that someone linked, however indirectly, to Epstein's orbit would be found dead under circumstances that fueled public speculation. Mark Milton was an Arkansas businessman and former Clinton White House aide who served as a special assistant to President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Years later, his name resurfaced when records showed Jeffrey Epstein visited the White House at least 17 times between 1993 and 1995, with Middleton authorizing several of those visits and even personally flying out on Epstein's private jet. After Epstein's 2019 arrest and death, those connections were revisited, and scrutiny intensified through 2021 and 2022 as Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted and additional court records were unsealed. Then, on May the 7th, 2022, 59-year-old Mark Milton was found dead at the Haifa Ranch in Perryville, Arkansas, about 30 miles from his home. According to law enforcement, he was discovered from a tree with an electrical cord around his neck, and in addition to the investigators documented a shotgun wound to his chest, yet there was no gun in sight. The Arkansas State Medical Examiner ruled that Mark had died despite no sign of a weapon. However, documents released days later would then clarify that a shotgun was actually found roughly 30 feet away from his body, with investigators then theorizing that it must have been the recoil from the discharge that propelled it that far. But following his death, Middleton's family moved to block the release of investigative photos and detailed scene materials, citing their graphic nature, and a judge agreed to seal certain evidence, further limiting public access to the case details. But in the months that followed, scrutiny surrounding Epstein's past connections would remain intense, but the next loss would strike a survivor whose testimony had proved valuable in court. Carolyn Adriano was one of the key witnesses who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell in her 2021 federal trial that helped secure Maxwell's conviction and a 20-year sentence. In court, Adriano described being recruited into Jeffrey Epstein's orbit as a young teenager and spoke about the long-term trauma that she endured, including struggles with substance abuse. After the trial, she said she felt proud to have testified and hoped her story would empower other survivors. During the trial, she didn't use her last name, but she later revealed it as a show of strength and as a way to empower other victims to speak. Family members said she was planning a fresh start, including buying a home in North Carolina. But on May 23, 2023, Adriano was found dead at the DoubleTree by Hilton Hotel in West Palm Beach. Police responded after her husband found her unresponsive in their hotel room, and according to reports, she had gone to bed with her husband and children the night before, and when they awoke, she was naked and unresponsive in bed, and her husband began CPR before first responders arrived. Investigators reported finding drug paraphernalia in the room, including a crack pipe and a small bag with white residue and a needle. Toxicology later indicated methadone, fentanyl, and Xanax in her system, and police would rule her death as an accidental. However, her mother, Dorothy Groner, publicly questioned the ruling and said that her daughter had recently texted her about being sober and was apparently ecstatic about her future and plans for a fresh start. She also noted that vodka bottles were found in the room, despite no alcohol being detected in Adriano's system. Meanwhile, other relatives, including members of her husband's family, rejected those concerns and said the official ruling should stand, describing the family as just grieving an immense loss. Notably, Adriano was the second publicly known Epstein victim to die of an in a Tampa hotel room following the 2017 death of Lee Skye Patrick under similar circumstances. But unfortunately for the victims of Epstein, who no doubt were already spooked by the litany of suspicious deaths of women who chose to speak out against this infamous predator, the next highly suspicious death would be Epstein's most famous accuser, and the mysterious circumstances around her death would leave more questions than ever. As the world continued to dissect the fallout from the Epstein scandal, Virginia Giuffre had evolved from a victim into a warrior for justice for women and girls around the world. Over time, she stood up to the powerful, suing princes, confronting billionaires, and helping force sealed court records into public view and reshaping the public conversation about power and accountability in abuse and cases. But in the spring of 2025, things would get very scary. On March the 31st, Giuffre posted a photo of herself in a hospital bed, visibly bruised, claiming that she had gone into renal failure after a crash with a school bus and that doctors had only given her 4 days to live. However, almost immediately, Australian police would push back, denying the severity of the accident.
I do know there was an accident on the 24th of March. It was a bus with another vehicle.
And was there any passengers on the bus at the time? Are you aware?
I'm not aware of passengers on the bus, but certainly the bus driver reported it as he was required to do and in the right time frames. And I'm advised there was about $2,000 damage in the vehicle. not aware of any injuries.
At the same time, parents of children that were apparently on the bus would come out publicly to dispute her account as fiction in a rather suspicious article published by TMZ. Weirdly, a litany of articles in mainstream publications would be released around this time, discrediting Guthrie's claims with a level of venom that seemed unwarranted and very suspect. The Daily Mail would publish an extensive interview with the alleged bus driver, who essentially called her a liar and massively downplayed the incident. Then, on April the 25th, nearly a month after the reported car accident, emergency services were called to her rural home in Western Australia, where the 41-year-old was found unresponsive and pronounced dead at the scene. Soon after, her family confirmed that she had apparently taken, and major crime detectives stated that there were no early signs of foul play. Notably, her own father rejected the ruling outright, saying there was no way she would have taken.
I mean, I started crying right away. I'm still crying. I can't believe that this is happening. It's impossible. And then for them to say that there's no way that she did. Somebody got to her.
And after this, a 2019 tweet resurfaced in which Virginia insisted that if she ever died, it would not be by. However, behind the public headlines, apparently personal turmoil had been unfolding in her life, leading some people to believe the official version of events. According to her family, she first raised the prospect of divorce in August 2023, claiming that she no longer loved her husband Robert. And although they remained married, they separated in 2024 and stayed in separate homes. Then in January 2025, tensions erupted during their daughter's birthday reunion, and Virginia claimed that Robert became aggressive and assaulted her when she refused relations with him, claims which he would deny. In the days after the alleged assault, while Virginia was recovering at Royal Perth Hospital, she would take photos of her injuries, and although both contacted police, no charges were filed. Robert, however, secured a restraining order while she was hospitalized, gaining temporary custody of their younger children and blocking contact for 6 months. From that point forward, her family said the separation devastated her, and against that backdrop, her March 31st hospital post, the bruised photo, and claim that she had 4 days to live, was described by her family as desperate attempts to reach her kids. Then, on April the 25th, her brother Sky broke down her locked bedroom door and found her unconscious, attempting CPR for nearly 45 minutes before paramedics arrived. The actual manner of death would not be officially reported, but then in February 2026, a released email included a claim by another victim, Maria Farmer, that Virginia died from a gunshot wound. In the end, regardless of the official ruling, her death raised more questions than answered. It was a tragic close to one of the most important and powerful voices in the Epstein saga, leaving one final enormous question mark over the whole situation, a giant mystery that might never be solved. Do you think that it's at all possible that all of these deaths over the last few decades related to Epstein's crimes were just genuine coincidences, tragedies, and natural and normal ends? Or do you feel like something more suspicious has been going on to prevent the truth from coming out? Thanks for watching.
Bro, there's no way 22 people connected to the dude just mysteriously die like that. Fuck out of here, bro. He's just able to get away with this shit. This shit is not fooling anybody. Nobody. And I'm glad there's... I mean, Trapler Ross is low-key, like, he's kind of like a fucking... a worm of a human. But, like, this... No, I'm glad this was made. And put into a way that people can consume like this. He did that shit, bro. Epstein did everything, bro. He did all of it. Every single thing of all of it. Alright, let me get back to reading chat. That's enough of shit like that. If I was rich, I would fly to Scandinavia looking at stars. What did I miss? What are some chat highlights? America needs adventures to save the world. Hey. Hey.
John Blaze 26 just subscribed.
Johnny motherfucking Blaze. Johnny motherfucking Blaze. Shout out Johnny Blaze with the sub. Much motherfucking love. Let me scroll down. Man, my guy solving crimes? Come on, I'm just Detective Baldsky. Hey, you go to hell. You go to the blue part of hell where it's extra hot. While wearing a gasoline jacket